Jesus would have been about 33 years old. It's just before he was crucified. And actually in Matthew 23, he's actually laying out a lot of blistering judgments against the Pharisees, against the religious leaders. Matthew 24, which we've gone through, he begins to lay out lots of things that will happen. You'll be delivered up to persecution. There'll be false prophets and false messiahs, cataclysmic things that would happen. So then we kind of move through that generation. A generation typically is like 40 years. If you kind of keep going through time, in AD 64, this would have been about 34 years from when Jesus gave the warnings about the Great Tribulation and the destruction of Jerusalem that was coming. So we've got Nero begins his persecution of the Christians, and he begins to make war on the saints for like 3.5 years. And then we've got John coming along about AD 65, AD 66, and actually getting this revelation from Jesus. And he gets God's perspective on what's happening in this first century and, the war against the saints. So then in AD 66, we've got the Jewish revolt under Nero. In AD 67, Vespasian begins a war against the Jews and starts capturing certain key cities, Galilee and Judea. We see how that ties into Scripture in Revelation 11. It talks about how the nations, they will trample the holy city for 42 months. And Daniel's prophecy about the power of the holy people has finally been shattered. Then all these things will be completed. So we've got Daniel prophesying these events. In June of AD 68, we've got Nero committing suicide. That kind of ends his persecution on the saints. But then, we've got Vespasian surrounds Jerusalem, but then he pauses his war effort and then goes and takes the throne to become Caesar. And there's 3 other emperors that try to claim the throne, and they're all killed and have very short times in authority. We've got AD 69, Vespasian actually becomes emperor and Caesar. He takes his son, actually Titus, finishes the job. So we've got Titus in April AD 70, begins the siege of Jerusalem, which is a total shutdown of, food, water supplies. Nobody goes in, nobody goes out. It's total just desolation. That's the abomination of desolation. It's absolute destruction. That actually goes for like 5 months until AD 70 in September. Titus totally destroys Jerusalem and the temple, and that ends that. Revelation actually covers a 5-month of torment. So what we're trying to accomplish by laying out this timeline is we didn't try to force fit stuff into this timeline. Look at what Jesus said, interpret the Scripture in light of Scripture, not current events, and look at the historical facts of what actually unfolded. It seems like it all worked out.
It sure did.